All right, so a little while back, I did a video on the Ineos Grenadier, and I want to be upfront about something. I actually like the Grenadier. From a distance, aesthetically, conceptually, it's genuinely cool. A tough, no-nonsense, purpose-built 4x4 that looks like it belongs on a military base or on a safari in Botswana. I get the appeal, I do. But when I dug into what actual owners were experiencing, the reliability issues, the cost of ownership, the service network that's basically still a work in progress, I had to be honest about it, and a lot of people really did not like that. Let's just say the Ineos fan base has some feelings. They're passionate, dedicated, occasionally hostile feelings. So for those people watching right now, strap in, because today I'm going to go much deeper and you're probably not going to love what you hear. You're probably not. I'm almost going to guarantee that you're not going to like it. Today's question: is Ineos Automotive in serious financial trouble? And the answer, spoiler alert, is complicated, fascinating, and honestly a little wild. Let's start at the beginning, because you can't understand what's happening with Ineos today without understanding how the whole thing got started. The year is 2016, and a man named Jim Ratcliffe, a British billionaire, founder of Ineos Chemicals, one of the richest people in the United Kingdom, is sitting in his favorite London pub. The pub is called the Grenadier, and he and his friends are having a conversation about the fact that Land Rover has just decided to discontinue the original Defender. Now, Ratcliffe loved the Defender. He drove one on African safaris. It was his kind of vehicle, utilitarian, rugged, uncompromising. And Land Rover, in his view, had abandoned it to chase luxury buyers with soft rotors and leather seats and 16-inch touchscreens. So what does a billionaire do when a company stops making his favorite car? He builds it himself. He literally sketched a design on a napkin. I mean, the design that looked like a design that we already knew, the Land Rover Defender. That napkin still hangs on the wall of the pub today. And then he went to Land Rover with what he thought was a reasonable proposition. You're discontinuing the Defender anyway. Just sell me the rights, the tooling, the production equipment. Let me keep making it. And Land Rover said no. They didn't want a competitor trading on their heritage. And that refusal turned what could have been a simple manufacturing restart into a full from-scratch multi-billion-dollar car company. Because Jim Ratcliffe doesn't take no for an answer. And honestly, when you're a billionaire, you don't really have to. So Ineos went to work. They hired a design team. They sourced engines from BMW, transmissions from ZF, one of the most respected transmission makers in the world, and they contracted Magna Steyr to actually build the car. If you don't know what Magna Steyr is, they're essentially the same contractor that builds the Mercedes G-Wagon, so they weren't exactly hiring amateurs. They also needed a factory. Originally, they promised to build one in Wales, 500 jobs, post-Brexit vote of confidence in British manufacturing, the whole thing. The Welsh government spent $5 million preparing the site. And then COVID hit, and a Mercedes plant in Hambach, France came up for sale that Daimler had invested over $550 million upgrading, and it already had 1,300 experienced workers, and so Ineos just bought that instead. Wales wasn't pleased. The UK wasn't pleased. Ratcliffe eventually repaid the Welsh government and just moved on. The finished vehicle, the Grenadier, launched with 7,000 pre-orders before it even left the factory. By the end of its first 2 years, Ineos claimed to have delivered around 20,000 vehicles. The US became its single largest market, accounting for roughly 60% of global sales. And from the outside, that looks like a success story. But those numbers, they only tell half the story. Here's where things get interesting, and by interesting I mean alarming depending on your perspective. Ineos Automotive is a private company, so they're not broadcasting their financials on a billboard. But between CEO commentary and UK companies' house filings, we know quite a bit. Their total losses since founding are over $1.2 billion. Some estimates now put cumulative losses as high as 1.4 billion euros. Last year alone, Ineos Automotive lost approximately $400 million. They currently owe their parent company, the Ineos Group, more than $3 billion. And here's the kicker. The interest payments on that debt alone totaled more than $350 million in the last fiscal year. Think about that. They're paying more in interest on money they borrowed than most car companies make in profit. They're running on a financial treadmill and the speed keeps going up. Now, the company would tell you, and to be fair, they do tell you, things are improving. Revenue is up. Gross profits are up. EBITDA is improving, and they're not wrong. Those are real metrics moving in the right direction. But losing $400 million a year when you're carrying $3 billion in debt and paying $350 million in interest, those aren't just early startup jitters. That's a structural problem. And it's not just the financial losses. The operational story is genuinely rough. In September 2024, Ineos halts all production at its Hambach factory for 4 months. Why? Because their seat supplier, Recaro, the famous German seat manufacturer, filed for bankruptcy. And here's the thing, Ineos has no backup seat supplier, none. One supplier goes under, the entire production line goes dark for 4 months. There's a term in manufacturing called supply chain resilience. Ineos apparently hadn't gotten that memo. When a company that's been making cars for 2 years can be completely shut down because one supplier goes bankrupt, that tells you something about the maturity of their operation. Moving ahead to March 2025, Ineos recalls over 7,000 Grenadier SUVs in the US. The reason? The doors might fly open while you're driving. Not metaphorically, literally. The door latch mechanisms weren't getting enough grease during assembly. Doors not fully latching on a moving vehicle. Now, to be fair, recalls happen to every automaker. Toyota, Ford, GM, they all do it. But those are companies that have been making cars for decades with battle-tested quality control systems. Ineos is a toddler in the automotive world, and we didn't put enough grease on the door is not a great look. There was also a separate recall for non-locking nuts on the steering rod ball joint. Loose steering components, which if you're keeping score at home, is worse than the door thing. Now you might be thinking, okay, but Jim Ratcliffe is filthy rich. He can just keep writing checks, right? Well, about that. As recently as 2023, Ratcliffe was the second wealthiest individual in the UK with an estimated net worth of nearly $40 billion. That's the kind of money where you don't really worry about losing $1 billion here or there. But between 2024 and 2025, his net worth reportedly dropped by about $8.7 billion. He fell from 4th to 7th on the Sunday Times rich list. His current estimated fortune is between $16 and $23 billion, depending on who you ask. Bloomberg and the Sunday Times disagree by about $7 billion, which honestly is just a normal thing that happens when you're arguing about billionaires. The Ineos Group as a whole, the chemicals conglomerate, not just the automotive side, posted over £124 million in losses in the period leading up to the 2025 rich list. And Fitch Ratings revealed that Ineos Group's debt has now reached 8 times its annual earnings. 8 times its annual earnings. That can start being an alarming number. Ratcliffe also bought a minority stake in Manchester United for $1.5 billion in early 2024. Manchester United has since lost over £300 million under his watch and is currently having its worst Premier League season since the league was created. He's cut nearly 40% of the club's workforce, canceled Christmas parties, and raised the ticket prices, which suggests the man is in cost-cutting mode across the board, not in write blank checks mode. So is Ratcliffe rich enough that Ineos Automotive's losses will never matter? Maybe, probably, technically. He still has billions and billions of dollars. But he's not as cushioned as he was 2 years ago, and more importantly, the entire Ineos empire is under financial pressure simultaneously. The chemicals business, the automotive division, the sports investments, they're all bleeding at the same time. Here's the honest answer. Nobody knows for certain, but there are real signs pointing in both directions. Sales are growing. They're approaching 30,000 vehicles globally. The Americas business alone hit 11,500 vehicles in 2 years. Revenue, gross profit, and EBITDA are all trending up year over year. The company CEO, Lynn Calder, said in early 2026 that she is extremely optimistic about 2026 being a pivotal milestone year. And there are new products coming. The Fulcilier. I kind of wanted to say Fulcilier, but I think it's called Fulcilier. A smaller, more affordable mid-size SUV expected in the next 2 to 3 years. And I'll just say it. The thing looks totally fetch. Like genuinely. If the Grenadier is the rugged older brother who bench presses Land Rovers for fun, the Fulcilier is the younger sibling who somehow got all the good looks and the personality and is going to be more affordable on top of that. It'll ride on the skateboard EV platform and offer both a pure battery electric version with roughly 250 miles of range and a range extended hybrid version with specs that aren't readily available yet. This is the product that could actually move the needle in terms of volume because right now the Grenadier starts at around $80,000, which is a tough sell in a market where the average car loan payment is already $750 a month. Ineos is also reportedly considering building a factory here in the United States to avoid the tariff hit. The US is their biggest market, and shipping vehicles from France while paying a 15% import tariff is going to eat into your margins on every single unit sold. They're targeting 200,000 to 250,000 annual vehicles by the early 2030s. For reference, they're currently somewhere around 25,000 to 30,000 per year. That's nearly a tenfold increase in a decade. Ambitious doesn't begin to cover it. The tariff environment is brutal right now. Estimates suggest US tariffs are adding anywhere from $5,000 to $16,000 a vehicle in additional costs. On a vehicle that already has razor-thin margins, that's potentially catastrophic. The job cuts are significant. Hundreds of positions eliminated from UK and European corporate offices in late 2025. That's not the behavior of a company feeling confident. That's the behavior of a company tightening its belt because it has to. And the structural debt problem, the $3 billion owed to the parent company, $350 million a year just in interest, doesn't disappear because sales are improving at the margins. You need a dramatic, sustained increase in sales volume and profitability to make a real dent in that number. Could Ineos be acquired? Yeah, for sure. That's definitely possible. The Grenadier has a genuine brand cachet in the off-road community. There are automakers who would love that positioning in the factory in Hambach. But Ratcliffe's ego is tied up in this thing too, so let's be honest. He started it because Land Rover wouldn't do what he wanted. Selling his passion project to another automaker would probably feel like a sting. Here's what I keep coming back to. James Dyson, yes, the vacuum guy, spent $600 million trying to build an electric car and had to just walk away from it. Because building a car company from scratch is one of the hardest things you can do in business. Tesla spent 20 years burning through subsidies and investor capital before it turned consistently profitable. Rivian is still hemorrhaging money and its future is in doubt. Lucid is clearly on the ropes. Ineos has done something genuinely impressive. They built a real car with real engineering partners that real people are buying and actually taking off-road. The Grenadier, whatever its faults, it's not vaporware. It really exists and people do love it. I mean, really love it. So much so that apparently if you call out some of the faults, the owners will say that you're lying about them and then admit that the faults exist, but defend them. But love doesn't pay $350 million in annual interest charges. The Fusilier is their best shot at scale. A more affordable EV or hybrid in the mainstream SUV segment could absolutely attract a much broader buyer base than the $80,000 hardcore off-roader niche. If they can get that vehicle to market, price it competitively, and build it without the supply chain chaos that has plagued the Grenadier, they might actually have a path to success. But that's a lot of ifs. And in the meantime, they're burning through money at a rate that would make most CFOs need a stiff drink. The story of Ineos Automotive is a story of a very rich man who got told no and decided that it was simply not an acceptable answer. And there's something genuinely admirable about that, although sometimes it's hard to think of a billionaire as the underdog. But when those dreams meet reality, it can sometimes be a little terrifying. Whether this company gets acquired or eventually gets quietly wound down or survives or thrives, it's going to be one of the more fascinating business stories of the decade. A billionaire betting everything on a niche off-roader in a market being eaten alive by cheap Chinese EVs and tariff wars with a debt load that would make your eyes water. I'll keep watching and I'll keep letting you know what I find, even though the fanboys probably won't like it. I'll see you next time.